Now going live across all of the different streams. We simulcast on YouTube, Periscope, Facebook. We're hoping to get on LinkedIn soon enough. But this is another edition of Watching the Watchers Live. My name is Robert Gruler. I'm a criminal defense attorney here in Scottsdale, Arizona. Watching the Watchers is a program that we do to monitor police misconduct, judicial misconduct, prosecutorial misconduct, political misconduct, basically everything that you're seeing in the world right now, all of that type of misconduct from our men and women in blue with guns and badges. That's the type of stuff that we want to monitor and call out. The reason being, if there's more sunlight shined down upon all the malfeasance and misconduct, the more likely that it is that we're going to be able to maybe see some meaningful reform, some criminal justice reform, which of course most of the country, most of the world actually is clamoring for at this time. And so today we've got a couple things scheduled for you. We're going to talk about some headlines, talk about the news. We're going to cover George Floyd. He had his funeral. We have some other stories about counter protesters that are now bubbling up. We're going to talk about a situation that happened out of Virginia where a police officer was actually assaulting somebody in their own vehicle. We're going to talk about the New York Police Department throwing a temper tantrum. We've got some good clips on that. And then we're also going to make sure we cover the fact that cops, of course, got canceled. I want to share some of my thoughts and opinions on that one particular topic. So now, let's dive into it. Let's do a quick recap. You know, a lot has happened in the past week. We're starting to see sort of some developments bubble up from different factions, from different sides of the debate that is going on. We're going to get into all of that. But first, I want to take a quick moment and just pay tribute. I want to remember George Floyd and the movement that his death and the whole tragic situation that happened with him has led to. So we're going to start there and remember George Floyd. Now, if you recall, this happened some time ago. It's taken a little bit of time for all of this to get organized, and the funeral just happened very recently. Let's see, it happened yesterday, in fact, at the Fountain Praise Church in Southwest Houston on Tuesday, June 9th. 2020, over 2,500 people in attendance, which is an amazing turnout. Of course, that's to be expected when something like this happens. And we see, some of familiar faces. We've got, Reverend Al Sharpton here. We've got a lot of the photographs over here. We've got a, beautiful coffin and a good group of men who are carrying him into, his ceremony and ultimately to his final resting place. And so we just want to touch base on this quickly. A couple points, several people spoke at the funeral, and we're going to listen to some things they had to say.
For my brother, my big brother.
Well, I think I messed up the audio there. 1 second. Let me switch this over to play.
That's Big Floyd. Everybody knows who Big Floyd
there we
is
go.
now. Third Ward, CUNY Homes. That's where we was born at, but we're going to be remembered. Everybody going to remember him around the world. He's going to change the world.
That's George Floyd's brother, Philanese, I think is how you say his name, Philanese Floyd. He is, saying that Floyd is going to change the world, and I absolutely agree with him on that. This has been something that I don't think the world has seen before in terms of unity with relation to criminal justice reform. It's just been something that has been on the forefront of a lot of people's minds for a very long time, and now it is becoming, sort of a reality. People are really considering some drastic changes that would have otherwise been not even possible to even discuss, which is a very good thing. Now, we also have George Floyd's niece, Brooke Williams. She comes out. She's got, she's upset. She's very upset. She got some powerful testimony. Let's listen in.
First off, I want to say, hello, my name is Brooke Williams, George Floyd's niece, and I can breathe. Long as I'm breathing, justice will be served for Perry. First off, I want to thank all of you for coming out to support George Perry Floyd. My uncle was a father, brother, uncle, and a cousin to many. Spiritually grounded and activist, he always moved people with his words. Their officer showed no remorse while watching my uncle's soul leave his body. He begged and pleaded many times just for you to get up, but you just pushed harder. Why must this system be corrupt and broken? Laws were already put in place for the African American system to fail. And these laws need to be changed. No more hate crimes, please. Someone said, make America great again. But when has America ever been great?
Yeah, so she's obviously very upset there. Now, you know, the content of what she has to say is less important than the fact that she's upset, and she's conveying, I think, a sentiment that a lot of people feel, which is just frustration, a bunch of broken promises, and no real meaningful reform for a very long time. And so her, you know, her kind of outpouring, I kind of felt that, and I just wanted to share that. Now, George Floyd's brother, Phil Anise, has been very busy. He testified in Congress very recently. We had some of the clips. The video's kind of iffy, but he's in front of Congress, in front of Jerry Nadler, and he's actually speaking, and he says,
"So sorry for your loss."
You know, he's been through a lot.
Floyd, you may begin.
Thank you. Chairman Jerry Nadler and members of the committee. Chairman Gerald Nadler and members of the committee, thank you for the invitation here today to talk about my big brother.
Yeah, so the video's a little bit choppy.
The world knows him as George, but I called him Perry. Yesterday, we laid him to rest. It was the hardest thing I ever had to do. I'm the big brother now, so it's my job to comfort my brothers and my sisters, Perry's kids, and everyone who loved him. And that's a lot of people. I have to be the strong one now because George is gone. And me being the big brother now is why I'm here today, to do what Perry always would have done, to take care of the family and others. I couldn't take care of George that day he was killed, but maybe by speaking with you today,
yeah, so I'm not sure what happened with the video there. Not a big deal, but basically what he's saying, you know, this guy, I gotta, you know, recognize what he's been doing. His brother just died. He just buried him. He's testifying in Congress. Literally, the entire world is up in arms over what happened to his brother, and he's kind of, you know, been thrust into the forefront of a global issue, something with, you know, massive ramifications throughout the entire planet, and he's showing up and he's just executing. So wanted to just, you know, hats off to him. Major, you know, kudos on that. A job well done, testifying in Congress and burying your brother it's a pretty amazing thing that he has done that in light of everything that he's been through. So you know, I have some experience with some of that, and I just wanted to take a quick moment and pause and acknowledge that. So amazing job to him for keeping it together. A lot of people are leaning on him for strength, his family, his friends, and it seems like he's doing a pretty damn good job there. Now, he's 100% right? What has happened here is essentially unprecedented. We've never seen anything like this. Spoken to a lot of other people with more gray hair than me, and they've also explained that. You know, they lived through the 60s, 70s. They've lived through, you know, really tumultuous times in our country's history, and they've never seen anything quite like this. And because there hasn't been anything quite like this. The George Floyd protests, they've spread to over 400 cities and towns, all 50 states, and even other countries. They've taken place in 50 countries and on every single continent except Antarctica. So here's a picture of protests in Paris just a couple days ago, 4 days ago. And, you know, this is something that is incredible. And it begs a lot of questions. You know, what is happening? Is this American police problems? Is this law enforcement problems that are global? You know, why are people in Paris? Why are people in Asia and in Europe and in Africa? Why are they also upset about this? Are the police just as bad? Do they also have systemic racism? Do they have corruption in their law enforcement? I mean, the answer, I think, is yes. Everybody has issues with the current model of law enforcement, with the sort of monopoly on power that they have, the lack of accountability that they have relative to our interests as civilians. They've got qualified immunity. All of their records are protected. There's no Brady lists that are on a national level that we can all access. Many of them don't even have body cameras. We're going to talk a lot about these issues in the remainder of the show, but the point is, what is happening? And this is opening the door for a very serious conversation, which we are having currently. When we were going through some of the George Floyd stuff, we wanted to just make a quick note that there were still some issues kind of surrounding that $20 bill. So if you remember, the entire basis for why the police were interacting with George Floyd in the beginning was because they said he had counterfeited some money, using counterfeit money. And really, we just don't have any idea what actually happened to that $20 bill. So if he goes into the store and he spends that money, or somebody sees that money, they run that marker through it, what happened to it? If that was the cause of all of this, what happened to that $20 bill? It's kind of one of those things that was unanswered. We have both autopsies back. Both autopsies sort of agree that he was killed by this officer. I don't think that there's going to be much argument over a lot of that. Of course, the defense is going to spin that whatever way they can. But by and large, this is something that has gone unanswered. So what happened to the $20 bill? It went from a counterfeit bill to a man being killed by millions of people around the nation just hurting, then people being very angry, militant way of destroying burning cities, then to grieving and trying to protest. You just think about that all from a counterfeit bill. That's right. And, we know that it was, the penalty was very low, $1,000 to $3,000. But what happened to it? Well, we're unable, under Minnesota law, the BCAA is unable to discuss evidence or details of an open and active investigation. So we really don't know what happened to it, but we are certainly going to find out at some point. We also want to just make a quick note here. International movement is taking place right underneath our feet. We've got stuff in Berlin. We've got protests in Amsterdam, over in Vancouver, over in Washington, D.C., in Minneapolis, in Atlanta. So these are happening all over the country and all over the world. It's amazing, and we're happy to be a part of meaningful, progressive change, and we're going to keep bringing the stories. So that was the segment on George Floyd. May he rest in peace. Hopefully his family, his friends have some closure and find some peace this evening. I want to talk about another story that we saw in the news. Counter protesters. There's a video of them with an American flag, multiple Trump banners out there reenacting the death of George Floyd. So we've got the pendulum swinging the other way. This is something that I've talked about a lot on the show. The pendulum swings both ways. At the outset of this, the whole country was unified in what they saw against happening to George Floyd. We were very upset about it. We were unified. The pendulum was on one side. The pendulum swung a little bit, and people started defending the cops. And now we're seeing that to a certain extent. We're going to cover the New York Police Department. They threw a temper tantrum the other day. I'm going to cover that. We've got some video. We've got these protesters. We've got more and more people who are rallying against any meaningful reform. We've got people trying to co-opt the justice reform movement. We have, Antifa. We've got other, white supremacists. We have politicians from both parties jumping into it. There's been a vacuum of power that has been created, and everybody is racing in to try to grab some of it. And so the pendulum is swinging the other way. People are now organizing in a way that is going to basically push back against the justice reform movement. And it's going to get ugly. We're seeing that already. It's already pretty ugly. I'm happy that we're having the conversation about criminal justice reform. Not particularly happy with what I'm seeing in terms of, stores being burnt down, people being killed. Never wanted that. That shouldn't be a part of the conversation ever at all. But the meaningful part of the conversation, of course, we want to continue to have happen. And unfortunately, people are becoming angry. They're becoming irritable, and they are acting out. They're lashing out. I want to show you this clip that comes from an NBC affiliate 10 of these protesters. It's pretty gross.
What happened next was this: a group of people counter-protesting on private property decorated with Trump signs next to the road, antagonizing protesters. On this cell phone video shared with NBC 10, we can see a man kneeling on the chest of another person on the ground. It's not clear why. They shouted that George Floyd should have complied with police and that, quote, Black lives matter to no one.
It automatically brought me to tears.
Darian Fennell organized yesterday.
Yeah, so that was the protest, and we got some reactions from some people, but I think we can all kind of agree on what the reactions are. That sounds horrendous. It's really inappropriate, not good comments. It's insightful. It's almost meant to incite a response. To me, when I see something like that seems so obviously kind of meant to instigate people, I get concerned about that. You know, they put the flags up, they're on private property. You can see how they're sort of orchestrating this type of protest to cause a reaction from the other side. We're seeing that on both sides of this. Here we've got, you know, some white Trump, you know, counter protesters. But on the other side, we've had, and I covered this in previous shows, cops who are causing or instigating the chaos, cops without badges, officers or unknown people who certainly look like law enforcement, who are throwing, Molotov cocktails and stuff in trash cans and lighting those up. We have officers with no names, totally unidentified. They're all in, riot gear. We don't know who anybody is, and they're stealing waters. They're doing all sorts of horrendous things from the protesters. So they're instigating to cause a reaction out of the protesters. On the other side, we've got, these white Trump supporters who are allegedly Trump supporters who are also trying to incite a reaction. Fortunately, that didn't happen. The protesters who were walking by their street didn't engage with them, but certainly, things could get sour if somebody decides that they're going to go over there. They said specifically in that clip, the guy's was ridiculous. He said specifically they should have, I think it's highlighted here. Let me get over to it. Yeah, so we have it on this clip.
Fuck you! Line with the cops. He come line with the cops, and this wouldn't happen. Keep going.
Yeah, so he's saying there, if you didn't hear that, this is what happens. This is what happens. Comply with the cops. Comply with the cops. He's dead because he didn't comply. So, I don't know what video they saw. I thought he was totally compliant when he was on the ground in handcuffs and he had 3 cops on the back of his neck, maybe 4. He was pretty damn compliant as far as I can tell. They kept the knee on the neck after he was complying. So, that it looks to me like it is just a setup. Like they're just, there's a bunch of people back there, probably with guns, probably with some weapons. They're waiting for somebody to go over to them and cause a scene so that they can respond in kind. You see all of those people just kind of lined up there in the back, and it's meant to incite, it's meant to cause rage. So I'm very glad that the protesters, of course, did not bite on that. Those people should be ashamed of themselves for trying to take advantage of a dead person in George Floyd in what was clearly a unifying event and a national and global tragedy, something that should never happen. I don't know what they're talking about. I don't know if they even watched the video, or I don't know, what their specific viewpoint is, other than they seem to be highly, highly ignorant and highly misinformed. Now, one of these individuals is actually from the Bayside State Prison, and he's an officer there. So he's actually essentially law enforcement. He's not a uniformed patrol officer that you would see on the streets, but he's an officer in the prison complex. So the Bayside State Prison released a statement. We have been made aware that one of our officers from the Bayside State Prison participated in the filming of a hateful and disappointing video that mocked the killing of George Floyd. The other person was from FedEx. That person who the statement did not identify has been suspended and banned while the agency investigates. So we have one FedEx employee, we've got one corrections officer from Bayside who is law enforcement, who they're not naming, as is always the case. They never name. Well, no, we do have a name: Joe DeMarco and Jim DeMarco. Okay, we do have names. Good, but the agency didn't name them, but somebody else found their names. So, this is kind of, they try to hide the ball on these things. It sounds like he's been suspended and banned while the agency investigates. I don't know what they have to investigate on that. That guy is clearly not somebody who should be in a law enforcement position. But certainly they can do their investigation and have a field day with that. All right. So I want to talk about another situation that we see this popped up out of Virginia. So a regular segment that we have on this show is the Bad Popo segment, where we talk about bad police officers. You know, that was kind of a fun name, something that pre-2020 protests that we would be kind of jokey about. We would say, you know, okay, yeah, bad popo, and I would scold them and say bad popo, and it was fun and kind of jokey. Kind of decided not to continue to do that. I mean, the conversation is a very serious conversation, and certainly requires, I think, the type of focus and detail and sincerity that is due this type of conversation. And so we're going to kind of hold off on that. But this guy is certainly a bad police officer, and he is on his way out. I want to tell you about the story, and then I want to break down some of potential solutions. So when we're talking about this, why did this cop, think about it this way, why did this cop ever even get on the force? How was he allowed to be on the force? Did anybody do any screening or anything? We're going to talk about maybe some fail-safes that we want to look at. But what happened here? How did he get on here? So this story comes from Virginia, the Virginia State Police. And what ended up happening is there is this officer, and his name is Jacob Gooch from the Virginia State Police. He resigned after he claimed in a text message to his brother, Mark, that he intentionally coughed on a driver he ticketed in hopes of spreading the coronavirus. So in one text message exchange, Jacob Gooch told Mark, which is his brother, and another brother that he gave a Mennonite man a ticket and coughed on him, quote, so he would spread corona to the wedding they were going to, LOL. So, you know, this is an officer who is just kind of flagrantly, I mean, this is an assault type of charge. By most other states, by many jurisdictions, by many statutes, what that officer did, if you went and coughed on somebody with the intention of infecting them with a virus or bacteria or anything, that is an assault. That is physical particles leaving your body and entering somebody else to harm them. Now, the law draws, you know, some pretty clear distinctions, and it can be a little bit trickier of analysis than that. But if this officer is intentionally trying to cause somebody, you know, harm through their breath, through coughing on them, that's an assault. There is case law throughout the country that says if you, let's say for example, you did it this way. What if you were smoking a cigarette and you're at a bar and you're in an altercation with somebody and you took a big puff of that cigarette or that cigar and you just blew it right in somebody's face? Assault? Yeah, that's an assault. There's case law that supports that. There's an assault. It's an offensive touch. You intended to touch that person. You blew on them. You blew smoke in their face, and you intended to do that. So therefore, that's going to be assault. That's a criminal charge for something like that. It's absolutely reckless for an officer to be doing that. He knows they're going to a wedding, so he's going to cough on them. I don't know what a Mennonite man is. I don't know anything about any of that stuff. It doesn't matter because it's not important. If you're coughing on somebody, they're going to a wedding, and you're intending to infect them at a time when the entire country is on a quarantine, the entire world is on a quarantine, you're saying they're going to go to a very highly populated, densely populated wedding, and now we're going to try to infect that entire group of people. I mean, that's like mass assault. So it was a horrendous thing. But how did this guy even get on the force? And how did this interaction, this exchange start? Well, it started actually with this cop's brother. So Jacob Gooch, who was communicating with Mark Gooch, who is this individual right here. So Mark Gooch, which is his brother, was charged with murdering this woman here, Sasha Kraus. She was a Sunday school teacher who disappeared from a Mennonite community in New Mexico earlier this year. So this cop's brother allegedly murders this woman here, and he's text messaging his other brother who is infecting people who are going to Mennonite weddings with coronavirus on a grand scale and bragging about it in text messages to his two brothers. So the question is, you know, putting this in context, we've talked about a lot today, but how are these people getting past the hiring process? How are they even getting onto the force? I mean, both these people here are brothers. Presumably they've got certain things in common, certain upbringings in common. They're both facing certain criminalities. One has an assault. One is under investigation for murder. They both seem to have an issue with a certain community, the Mennonites. Mark Gooch allegedly murdered somebody from that community. The other guy allegedly, assaulted somebody, or admits to assaulting somebody with his cough in the middle of a traffic stop. And they both, Jacob gets on the force. Mark Gooch doesn't. But how did he do that? How did he get on there? And the bigger question is, what are some of the solutions that we can impose to help prevent these people from ever getting onto the force, And so I want to spend a little bit of time today talking about some solutions. Solutions are being thrown around a lot. Last week, I was a little concerned that I wasn't hearing any solutions. I had no understanding from anybody who was in the Black Lives Matter movement, or really in any justice reform movement. What are we doing? What do you want to do about this? Is there anything that we can do to prevent this problem? I'm hearing a lot of defund the police. I'm hearing a lot of end systemic racism, end the patriarchy, down with white supremacy, all of those types of things. But I really don't know what that means. I really have a hard time understanding what can we do practically to improve all of our lives and improve our justice system. Is there anything? And as we're going through these solutions, I want to really highlight, is there anything of these solutions, anything that we could do that would have prevented what happened in George Floyd's case or Breonna Taylor's case? If you don't remember Breonna's case, she was at home in bed and she was shot at 20-something times, hit 8 of those times, and she was killed. Totally innocent. The police were in the wrong apartment. They had already arrested the guy. Is there anything else there? They shot and killed Breonna. Then they charged her boyfriend, who fired back, with attempted murder for trying to murder the police after they blew into their house and killed her. Is there anything here in terms of solutions that would have prevented that? Let's talk about them. So the first one I want to highlight is body cameras. Okay, body cameras. This is a big issue, and one that I think we should really spend some time on and look at. The reason I say that is because I think they're very important. I think they're very important in terms of making sure that there's a certain level of accountability for all police officers. Cops absolutely lie. We have seen it many, many times. We have represented many thousands of people. Cops lie in their reports. They lie on the stand, and they lie outside of court. They lie during interviews. They're constantly, now this is not all cops, but they do lie. We just have to acknowledge that. They falsify evidence. They exaggerate evidence. But most of this stuff happens after the fact. We find out after we have the body cameras. If nobody was recording George Floyd's case on their own cell phones and the cops had body cameras, would there be the same reaction? Do you think there would have been? Do you think that evidence would have appeared? Do you think it would have ever leaked? Do you think that there's anything that body cameras would have done to have dissuaded these cops? That's really the only argument that I can see for it being a reactive or a proactive approach, is that you give all the cops body cameras and then they know that they're being watched, and then they act better. They act in accordance with the fact that they're being monitored. Now, I don't know that that actually happens, in large part because a lot of the body cameras never see the light of day. They never come out. They don't make them publicly available. You have to go and buy them from evidence, or you just never see them, or you see them and they send you these huge massive files and they bury everything behind all these different codecs, and you have to use all this different software to open and play them and download them, and they only store them for 10 days. They make it extremely convoluted to go and actually get the body cameras. Now, I support body cameras. I want more of them on there because I do think that there is a tendency of people to sort of maybe self-police themselves if they know that they're being watched. But there needs to be accountability and transparency with it. So just strapping body cameras on every single cop and giving them the ability to turn them on when they want, to turn them off whenever they want, doesn't solve the problem. When we talk about defunding the police, if we're going to do anything with funding, I would be open to funding more body cameras, more cameras, more head version body cameras that tie into the glasses or the axon on the chest. Either one of those, for every single cop who ever is given access to a badge and a gun, they need to have their stuff monitored. It needs to be publicly accessible, and it needs to be available for defendants and defense attorneys to do audits and monitor these police. My understanding is, I don't know this, but there are still large swaths of police agencies across the country that don't have body cameras. Just don't have them. Why? Why not? Every single phone has a camera on it. Every single tablet, computer, everybody's got cameras. Storage is cheap. Battery life is good. There's no reason they can't have these body cameras on. Now, that's one solution. But would it have done anything in George Floyd's case? Probably not. Probably not. If a cop's going to kneel on a guy's neck for 9 minutes and kill him, he's probably going to do that whether he's got a body camera or not. Now, that being said, I would highly encourage, body cameras on every single cop. There have been many situations when it comes to body cameras where we have gotten cases outright dismissed as a result of the body cameras. Cops will write one set of facts according to their reports. And this is not a joke. We've done this, and I've personally done this. Cops will write one set of reports in their narrative. They'll say, X, Y, and Z did this, 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 and this, and this, and this. We get it. We take it into the prosecutor. We say, hey, our client's version of this story is totally different. Your cop said this happened. Our client says this happened. They say, well, we're going to trust the cops. We say, okay, cool. Well, did they have a body camera on? Yep, they had a body camera. Okay, we'd like to see that. Have you watched it, Mr. Prosecutor, by the way? No, they have never. They don't watch them. They don't watch them most of the time because there's too many cases. There's too many of them. They don't have any interest in watching them. The police will write their report, usually a couple pages on small cases, massive pages on bigger cases. But the prosecutors just read the report and they trust that the officers are doing what they say they will do. Well, we get the body cameras. We take it back to our office. We review it. There have been many, many times when I have taken my Surface, my Microsoft Surface, put the video on there and taken it into a prosecutor's office and said, hey, you have to watch this because the video that you're going to see here from your cop contradicts everything that they put in their report. And they say, fine. And you have to physically hold it. You have to hold the thing and you have to have it queued up and ready to go. And you have to say, here, watch. Then they'll watch it. Then they'll say, you're right. Then we'll get a decision on a dismissal or an amendment or whatever the reduction in the charges. That's how difficult it is to get many of these people to actually review the evidence from their own officers. Now, not every time. Sometimes you just send an email to a prosecutor and they say, sure, I'll take a look at that. But by and large, they are not watching these things. It's up to the defense attorney or our clients or people without an attorney to get and review these things. So we need to streamline that process. It's a massive problem for getting and accessing these things. Many cops don't even have them. They should have head cams, body cams, dash cams, everything, no secret cell phones that they're texting people back and forth on. We want to know what the communication is. We want to hold them accountable. That's what I have to say about body cameras. Now, let's talk about some other solutions. So another good one that I have seen floating around, I think it's very good. I'm not discounting these types of claims or these types of reforms, but we want to ask the question when we are thinking about what we want to implement or how we're going to implement them. Would it have done anything in George Floyd's case or any of these other cases where people are getting killed by the cops? The next big one, and I've seen this a lot, is ending qualified immunity. Ending qualified immunity for the police, for law enforcement across the board. So if you're not familiar with what qualified immunity is, it's basically saying that certain people who work for the government are immune from civil claims. You cannot bring civil claims against them because they're immune. So in other words, we've asked the law enforcement, we've asked police to go do something because it happens to be dangerous or because it involves trampling on other people's rights, we're going to actually give them certain protections to do that. So like you remember in James Bond, how he has a license to kill. Okay, normal people, you and me, every single day, we can just, if we kill somebody, we get charged with a crime for that, or we're liable for that. We're civilly liable for the damage that we've caused. James Bond, he's got a license to kill. He can just go take people out, and he does a good job at it in an entertaining fashion. But it's not something, he's immune from any claims as a result of that. Kind of the same thing that we're talking about here. If police are arresting you and they break your bones or break your neck or cause physical injury, well, that's just part of the game. It's part of being a cop. You get to suffer from it. You don't have any ability to file any claims against these cops. Because of that, the cops can get away with a lot, and they know it. And they know that they can hurt people, and they know that they can cause damage because it doesn't matter to them. It just goes over to the police department. The police department's union deals with it, and the union hires attorneys, and it goes to the department, and they all, they reach a settlement with the city council. The city council writes a check for $25,000. Little note is made in the cop's file, but they're not personally liable for that. They're not going to lose their house. They're not going to lose their car. They're going to just go on about their business and continue to do the same thing that they were doing previously. They're going to continue to enforce the same way that they were enforcing and hurt people and injure people and break things in the same way because they know that there is no liability for them. So if we end qualified immunity and we say, we're going to open this up, we're going to allow you to sue the cops. If a cop is actually harming you, you have a claim against them. So just like somebody can come and sue me or sue you for basically whatever they want, we're going to open up that liability for the cops too. We're going to say, you don't get a free pass. You don't get to just go around and do whatever it is you want anymore. You have to think about your actions. You have the same standard of liability that you or I have. Now, I have a big problem with how this works with law enforcement because they fly under the radar. I've covered this many times on this program. Every time a cop gets in trouble, we hear it was a generic cop from so-and-so department. A Minnesota state trooper today has come under fire for, allegedly calling a black man racially derogatory terms and so on. But what was his name? And how many other disciplinary records did he have? And what's his Brady file look like? And has he ever been disciplined? And, how many other complaints have been filed against him based on race and so on? We don't know any of that stuff. It's not public. Many of those records are destroyed after a certain period of time because of immunity and those types of things. And so there's no recourse. They know that they're protected. So if we end those things, we pull those protections out and we say, now you're liable for your own actions. What is that going to do? Is it going to cause police officers to think a little bit more when they are going to go and put their knee on somebody's neck? I would certainly hope so. I'm going to guess that it would, but would it have done anything to prevent George Floyd's death? I don't know. I think it's a little bit more likely to have caused some change, or in Breonna Taylor's case, you've got 7 or 8 SWAT people kicking in doors and just firing rounds haphazardly. If they were all liable in Breonna Taylor's case, maybe they would think twice about that. Maybe one of them would have double checked and said, are we at the right guy's apartment or not? Hey, Lou, you want to call and check and make sure apartment 10B is the right one? Maybe they would have checked and Breonna would still be alive. Or maybe one of these other 3 cops would have said, hey, Derek, you're going to kill that guy. We're all going to get sued, arrested, and charged with crimes. Maybe take your knee off of him. But they didn't. They knew that they had qualified immunity. But if we took qualified immunity away, would they think differently about it? I would like to think so, but I just don't know specifically. I don't know what they would do. But it is a step in the right direction, and I think it is something absolutely worth exploring. There's a different video that happened that I recorded with another attorney here named Scott Griffith. It's on our channel if you want to watch that. It's all about qualified immunity, some of the rules surrounding that. I do think it is an appropriate reform. I'm happy to see that there are some politicians. I believe Justin Amash is somebody who's talking a lot about this and actually filed a bill in Congress to see what we can do to remove it. But ending qualified immunity, in my mind, I think it's still reactionary. It's not as proactive of a type of reform as we would like to see otherwise. Now, the final thing that I want to talk about, which is less reactive. So body cameras allow us to take a look at what happened after something occurred, after the incident. Ending qualified immunity gives us tools after something happens. If somebody, let's fast forward or let's rewind with George Floyd's case, and let's say we didn't have qualified immunity, so they could just sue all these guys civilly for anything, and they actually ended up killing George Floyd. the end of qualified immunity would not have prevented that from happening. They would have killed him anyways. So how do we prevent these murderous cops, these guys who want to cough on people in their cars when they're writing tickets and giving them the coronavirus so they take it over to their wedding party? How do we deal with those protesters who are sort of instigating, recreating George Floyd's death, screaming at protesters? You know, this guy's a law enforcement officer at a prison complex. How did he ever get hired there? You know, why is he of this mindset? Why is he of this disposition? Why is he doing those things? Maybe it's time for us to consider something that really nobody wants to talk about, and it is mental health with these law enforcement people. This is something that I think is a big issue, something that I would like to see some major reforms discussed moving forward. And here's specifically what I'm talking about. So not training. We're not talking about training, not sensitivity training, not de-escalation training, not racial sensitivity stuff. None of this coffee with a cop, like let's go have coffee and talk about things. Community listening, all of those things are fine. But those are all kind of Band-Aids on the problem. The real problem is, why are men and women who are just predisposed to hurting people and breaking things, why are they ever allowed on the force? Why are they ever brought in to our criminal justice system to begin with? There's just a certain group of people who we should never give a monopoly on power. We should never say you have the ability to go do whatever you want as long as you're doing it under the guise of a badge and a gun. On top of that, we're going to give you the whole monopoly, but we're also going to prevent you from having any actual liability for any of the harms that you do. Those two restrictions, unlimited power and absolutely no repercussions, are going to call a certain portion of humanity, just like people are called to be teachers or stay-at-home moms or lawyers or doctors. There's a certain allure from law enforcement that draws people who want that. They want that power. They want no repercussions. And we see it. You have probably seen it. When's the last time you were stopped by a police officer or any interaction you've had with law enforcement and you're like, man, that was a really pleasant experience. What a professional. It's very rare for me to do that. Cops are very high strung. I've been pulled over. I deal with cops on a regular basis. Now they tend not to like me or the things that we do. But generally speaking, most people I speak with, they never have good interactions with cops because it's a personality thing. It's a culture thing. They're drawing people in who want to break things and kill people, and they're ingraining them into this culture that is now, perpetuating the cycle. They get into the club, they got to do it because everybody else in the club is doing it. So how do we just put a hard line in there and pull these people out? How do we prevent them from ever getting on to the force? This is not Iraq. This is not Afghanistan. These are civilian streets. We're dealing with drug problems and speeding tickets. We are dealing with these things, but law enforcement is not. The men and women of the New York NYPD, LAPD, Arizona, Phoenix Police, Scottsdale Police, their job is not to go out there and prevent Osama bin Laden from blowing up the buildings. They are here as a civilian peacekeeping force. They should be treated as such. And those people that have mental health problems should never be allowed to make it to the force. They just should not. So how do we do that? What does that look like? What does the structure look like? So instead of the de-escalation, the sensitivity training, be nicer to minorities or whatever they do with these things, keep those if you want them. But how about we just get rid of the people who are problematic? Let's make sure that they do not make it onto the force. So the same way that you do a deep dive on other professionals, we need to start doing those with our law enforcement agencies. And I'm talking specifically about personality profiles, psychosexual evaluations, clinical narcissism. Are these people narcissists? Are they sociopaths? Are they psychopaths? There are classifications and there's ways to categorize these people. You go into the DSM-5, I think is what psychiatrists use. They have criteria for these things. If you do this, this, and this, and this, and this, you might be a psychopath. Are we even asking these questions of some of these cops? I think you kind of have to be a psychopath to put your knee on somebody's neck for 9 minutes and watch them expire right in front of you while people are literally telling you he's dying. Something has to be off there. So why was this guy, and I know Derek's Chauvin, the cop who killed George Floyd, I know he had a long history of other complaints. Many of them don't seem like they were sustained, but he had a bunch of them. So why does he have these problems? What is he doing on the force? What if we just said, we're gonna evaluate these people for clinical narcissism, clinical psychopathy, sociopathy, and we're gonna do it from a clinical perspective, from the civilian side. So, how do they handle these tense situations? How do they respond to anger? From a civilian side, from, if the same conversation that I would go have with my psychiatrist or my psychologist or my counselor or my doctor or whomever, and say, this is how I'm responding to these things. How can you help me? How can you give me the tools to improve that? Here, what we're doing is we're just saying, here's how we handle tense situations, not from a civilian perspective, but from a law enforcement perspective. If people are coming at you, here's how you respond. If somebody's doing something, here's how you respond. And it's all from a law enforcement. We're under attack. We're in the middle of, of an armed conflict type of mentality. Let's review it from a civilian mentality. Let's change that paradigm a little bit. We can also identify some of their underlying prejudices. So in a previous segment, I talked about specifically the cop who had a problem with Mennonites. His brother had a problem with Mennonites. Maybe somebody should have asked them if they have a problem with certain segments of the population. On a scale of 0 to 10, how much do you dislike Mennonites? And they could have said, I don't at all. But you would say, yeah, but you hesitated there. So is it a 0 or a 1 or is it a 10? And you can investigate that. You can say, yeah, we're gonna go in and investigate that. Now that of course presumes that these people are going to be honest, but there are ways that counselors and psychiatrists and people can create tests that make it hard to kind of fib the results. So we're going to do more mental health screening. The people who are lunatics should never make it onto the force. The people who are 22, 23 years old, who don't have any other job prospects, who have nothing else, they don't want to join the military, they want to stay here, they want to become a cop. If they're out looking for adrenaline, if they're out looking to punch somebody in the face and get rowdy, that's not what we want on the force. That's not the person. They can go join the military, they can go join a Brazilian jiu-jitsu class, and they can beat somebody up on the mats, but they're not allowed to have a badge and a gun. Specifically, what are their prejudices with particular demographics? I talked about the Mennonites, but what about other people? Men, women, blacks, whites, Asians, rich, poor. Are they going to pull over the guy with the red Lamborghini because they have a problem with rich people? Or do they have a bigger problem with African-American people? So they're just going to patrol those people. We have statistics, we have data, we can see where the anomalies lie. If one cop has 80% stops, he's a white cop, he's got 80% stops on African-American people or Hispanic people, should we know that? Can we just have a little chart and we can say, man, most cops, they're kind of even. They got 30% white, 30% Hispanic, and 20% African-American. Yeah, that's roughly the demographics of our state. That's roughly the demographics of this officer's particular patrol area. So that sounds about right. But we have that one cop who's got an 80% African-American stop rate. Why is that? Maybe we should just review that data, call that cop out, and say, hey, lunatic, what are you doing? Why are you stopping all of these black people? What's the deal? Is that happening? I don't know. Or are you prohibited from even having that conversation? Are the unions making it so that this type of data is not available? Do they want to protect their officers from having these conversations? But maybe that's a good place to start. Any one of these cops who is going through a psychosexual, psychoevaluation, a mental health screening, or any one of those things, if they fail, they don't get a job. They don't work in law enforcement. We have strict standards. You have to be a sane, rational, people-loving, freedom-loving, justice-promoting person to come work at our agency. We don't care if you fail the standards, you don't get a job. And if you're even questionable, they're kind of questionable. We give them a desk job. We don't give them a gun and a badge. That's it. Until we can learn a little bit more about how they're going to conduct themselves on the streets. They can sit behind in a probationary period. We can vet their work. They can do some follow-up examination. Then they can become cops. And look, certainly this is not going to be something that any of them want to do. I get it, but it's part of what's necessary because you've made it necessary. Your actions, your activities have made this necessary. You all hide behind the blue shield. You all protect one another. And so now it's time for the civilians to come in and say, hey guys, we're not in the middle of a war. You still have fundamental constitutional rights here on our soil that you need to abide by. And until you can show us that you can act like big boys and be adults, you're going to have to be monitored. You're going to have to be looked at because your agencies are not working. And it starts with mental health. This is proactive. This is probably a 20-year thing. 20 years from now, we'll see some results if we start implementing that now, because all the bad seeds are going to be thrown off the force, and all the new recruits, the people who are coming up, will say, yes, we're going to take this burden. We're going to go into law enforcement, and we're going to restore faith. I don't know what that's going to look like yet, but it's going to require some mental health screening. We're going to get past the screening. We're going to say, yes, we're not psychos. We are not racists. And we're just going to go out there and uphold the law. We're going to do it in a lawful, orderly fashion. After years of that, after purging some of the police from some of the bad police from the ranks, maybe we'll see some meaningful change. But it starts with mental health. We have to stay focused on that because a lot of these cops have no business whatsoever being behind a badge and a gun. Next, in big news, we are talking about cancellation of cops. Bad boys, what you gonna do? Yeah, they are canceled. Cops got canceled. They end their 6-year run. It was pulled last week after the George Floyd death. Series will not be coming back, according to the news articles. Cops is not on the Paramount Network. We don't have any current or future plans for it to return, a Paramount spokesman said in a statement. Live PD on A&E, however, may be coming back. Let's see here. It's still evaluating the right time to bring it back, but it appears unlikely to happen anytime soon. So that is the end of an era for Cops. Now, if you remember, Cops, as I said, Cops' 6-year run from this article, but really it's been on a number of different networks. My understanding is it's been on the air for about 25 years. So what are the reactions? What are people saying? Whoa, Cops. I mean, a lot of people watch Cops. Everybody grew up watching Cops. And I asked Miss Faith to go ahead and take a look at some of the reactions, and here's what she's pulled up. All right. So people are unhappy about it. Boo, F and BS, this is ridiculous. The news media labeled all cops bad. This is not, the show should be canceled if cops show up, I'm sick and tired of every network freaking out. All this over one person. Please consider bringing it back. Way too much pandering going on, the cancel culture, and so on, and so on, and so on, and so on. And so I actually couldn't disagree more with any of those opinions. In my mind, Cops was propaganda for law enforcement. Another commenter actually on the show introduced me to the phrase cop-aganda. Cop-aganda, which is, cops sort of fluffing themselves up and making themselves to be heroes at every single turn of the hour just for doing their jobs. And people are upset that the Cops show is canceled. But I am, like I said, I'm very happy about it. And the reason why, the propaganda that we see from Cops, every time that you saw an episode of one of those, I didn't watch a lot of them. I watched them before I became a criminal defense attorney, and then I started to watch what they were doing, and it's just so disgusting. What the show would do is highlight basically the worst of the worst. And they would find these people who very clearly have mental health problems. They've got substance abuse disorders, alcoholics, massive, really hard drug problems, people from broken homes, people with a lot of past trauma. And we saw some very colorful people in the history of that show, very overweight, deformed, drug use, scabs. I mean, really just, hurting people like you and me, just in really bad situations. And the cops would go in and they would just, of course, on Cops, they would do everything by the book, everything by the rule. They'd call everything in. This is Officer Smith so-and-so, and just reporting on a crime here, according to protocol 1, 2, 3, and everything's by the book. And we're going to go ahead and just confirm we can make an arrest there. And Is that okay, dispatch? And dispatch comes through. Yeah, sure, John Smith. Yeah, have a great time. Go. Okay. Everything is like a big hunky-dory love fest on that show for law enforcement. Everything's in the good light, and they always get the bad guy, and they're always arresting somebody, and they're always finding drugs. They're always serving their community, which, of course, is all just nonsense. I mean, we know on a daily basis what the cops do. I cover it on the show here. We talk about badpopo all the time. I have a whole wall of mugshots from cops who have been arrested for breaking the law themselves. I have personal experience representing many people who didn't do the things that the cops said they did. Many, many people. So it's just propaganda in my mind. It's propaganda. And it's not something that I think should be on the air, because here's what happens. I want to come full circle with this. Let's tie this back to the earlier segment in the show of those counter protesters who were sitting on the side of the road, laying on somebody's back, kind of mocking the kneeling thing on somebody's neck, sort of playing that it's George Floyd. And what do they say? They say, should have listened to the cops, should have complied, he wouldn't be dead. Well, I explained previously that they didn't even watch the video. Of course, George Floyd was totally compliant with what the cops were asking him to do. He was on the ground in handcuffs. He had to comply, and he had a knee on his neck, so it's totally irrelevant. But the point is, they are indoctrinated with this mindset that cops are heroes. Cops are always right. All you have to do is comply, and the cops will just take care of you. So just don't be a criminal, and everything's going to work out for you. Well, look, let's say that about George Floyd. There was allegedly a $20 counterfeit bill, which I covered previously. Nobody saw that. Breonna Taylor was shot and killed in her home by a bunch of cops with no wrongdoing. She was an EMT. I mean, there's countless, thousands and thousands of dead people at the hands of cops for doing nothing wrong. I think it's like 1,000 a year, right? So every couple of years, we have a 9/11 of dead people at the hands of cops. Now, you can say some of those are justified. Maybe some of them are. Does it need to be that many people? Probably not. Are there that many completely justified killings? The answer is no. Okay, we're talking about it. The whole world sees it. The whole country sees it. It is not justified. But by watching cops, by having this thing on the air for 25 years, of people just knowing the bad boys, they know the theme song, they know exactly that the cops are going to win, the bad guys are going to lose. Every criminal is a dreg of society. Every person who has any interaction with the cops is a piece of garbage criminal. That is the mindset. That is the stereotype. That's what causes other people to turn around and say, just comply with the cops. Ahmaud Arbery shouldn't have run. Maybe if he didn't run, maybe he shouldn't have been on the street. They come up with all of these rationales to say that what the cops do is justified. So the fact that it's off the air, I think, is a very good thing. I would very much like to just take a sip of this beverage here. My throat's a little bit parched, but cheers. No more cops. Cheers to the end of cops. Good stuff. Little vitamin water. All right. And finally, we're going to wrap up the show with my favorite part. The New York Police Department throws a temper tantrum. That's right. The New York Police Union President Mike O'Mara is unhappy. He is not happy at all. He says that they deserve respect. They should not be treated like animals and thugs.
Derek Chauvin, they are not him. He killed someone. We didn't. We are restrained. And you know what? I'm saying this to all the cops here. Because you know what? Everybody's trying to shame us. The legislators, the press, everybody's trying to shame us into being embarrassed about our profession. Stop treating us like animals and thugs and start treating us with some respect. That's what we're here today to say. We've been left out of the conversation. We've been vilified. It's disgusting. It's disgusting. Trying to make us embarrassed of our profession. 375 million interactions. Overwhelmingly positive. Nobody talks about all the police officers that were killed in the...
All All right. So, all right. So Mr. O'Mara, he demands respect. All right. You understand this, folks? Do not treat him like an animal. Do not treat him like a thug. The 30 to 50,000 New York police officers, they feel alone and they feel vilified. They are not animals and thugs. They deserve your respect. And of course, we've seen that. We've seen law enforcement just over the course of this last couple weeks, since the George Floyd stuff. I mean, I personally have seen just upstanding, very good, very law-abiding, very respectful, open to conversation, law enforcement all around New York. And so certainly Mr. O'Mara has a point.
He is fleeing! He's out of his ear! He's bleeding out of his ear! He's bleeding out of his ear! Get him better! What the fuck you walking up on me? I'm on the ground! Get the fuck away! Stop! Y'all don't want this thing! Back up! Get off the side!
Right out of Buffalo. Yeah, out of Buffalo, New York. Yeah, presumably part of the same union over there. Just acting, upstanding. That guy, of course, deserved to have his body thrown by two cops and have his head cracked open on the middle of the concrete. Certainly not thuggish behavior there. Certainly not acting like animals. Somebody shouts out, "He's leaking," as he's got blood literally, pooling in the back of his head and coming out of his earlobes. They didn't need to stop and actually help him either. They didn't need to get him medical attention. All they needed to do was just kind of walk right over him. One cop stops. If you watch closely, he kind of stops to pick up, to help, because he realizes that guy just cracked his head open. You can hear it on the video. You can hear the sound of his head hitting the pavement. It's very loud. One cop wants to stop and help him. Obviously, major mistake. You don't need to do that when somebody's laying on the ground and bleeding. So his supervisor just kind of pulls him up and says, hey, get back to work, because this is what we do as police officers. We are very good. We are not animals. We are not thugs. We are just allowed to do whatever it is we want. Right, Mr. Police Union Chief? Here is their response. First, of course, that is all nonsense. What you saw there was animalistic behavior. They were acting like thugs. They cracked a 75-year-old man's head on the ground. My understanding is that he's still in the hospital. Here is what they had to say about that. So the department initially released a claim saying that it was a skirmish. During the skirmish, one person was injured when he tripped and fell. He was injured when he tripped and fell. Oh, did he? Was the sidewalk uneven? Were his shoelaces untied? Looked like your officers pushed him and he fell. Police were reportedly clearing the area. They were out after curfew, different angles. There was no evidence of physical provocation on the elderly man's part. Went viral. Both of those cops were immediately suspended without pay. And he is, the man who fell and hit his head is, of course, reportedly in stable condition. And so does this look like he tripped and fell? Does that look anything like that? Looks like those two cops didn't like what he was doing. Now there's some, evidence, or there's some indication. I think President Trump actually tweeted that he was reaching for their belt or he was using a scanner or something. And there's other, evidence on the internet that are saying this whole thing is fake. It's falsified. It's been fabricated. This guy had something on the back of his head. Then he's running a blood tube or something. I don't know what that theory is. Looked to me like two cops pushed a 75-year-old elderly man and he cracked his head open. You could hear it on the video. You can hear his head hit. So I don't know necessarily how you fake that. But this is a response to the protests. This is what Mr. O'Mara was saying. Why are we treating these people like animals and thugs when they're just, they're not doing anything wrong other than cracking heads open of 75-year-old elderly men who were just out, protesting for their rights, which is a perfectly normal, good, valid American lawful tradition. So, it's hard for me to understand why people would categorize police as thugs and animals. Very strange. Maybe Mr. O'Mara will watch this video and some light will be shined upon him. Okay, these two guys were charged with second-degree assault. Robert McCabe, Aaron Torgalski. So they've been charged with crimes. Aaron was 39 and Robert is 32. Turned themselves in on Saturday after footage of them shoving 75-year-old Martin Gugino. They both pleaded not guilty. They were released without bail. The officers had been suspended without pay after a TV crew captured the confrontation the night before. If convicted, they face up to 7 years in prison. Police officers have stood by their colleagues on Saturday. A crowd of off-duty officers, firefighters, and others gathered outside the courthouse in a show of support for the accused officers, cheered when they were released. They were both released. McCabe's lawyer said that after the arraignment, prosecutors didn't have grounds to bring the felony. Decorated, saying decorated military officer, clean record as a police officer. Okay. Yeah. So typical defense attorney stuff, doing his job, needs to do it and represent these guys to the best of his ability. But maybe that was just an isolated incident. Maybe the cops by and large are not acting like animals and thugs. I mean, there's a video that I had on the last episode of the show that kind of shows I think 10 to 15 different clips of some of this stuff, but that's from other parts of the country. Let's see if there's anything else going on in New York. Let's take a look.
Authorities are certainly looking into that and looking into the actions of officers, and at the same time promising the appropriate action there. But if you just step back for a
another
second,
cop
we also
just throwing a young woman
are seeing
just
what is
right
very
on the
complex,
ground.
very difficult
Boom.
situation for many people here on the ground and really across the country here, because what you have
and you can see she's probably 110 pounds, and her shoe actually comes off. So her shoe comes off. That cop pushed her so hard. We don't see what happened previous to that, but here's the point. This type of stuff is happening across the board. You can find literally about 1,000 clips of this type of garbage going on with law enforcement. Mr. O'Mara, the reason why people are treating you like animals and thugs is because your cops are acting like animals and thugs. There's no way around it. We have video evidence of your cops slashing tires, punching people, breaking things, running cars through barricades, impacting physically people who are just on the streets peacefully protesting. So, of course, we're going to treat you like that. Of course, you don't get to be a part of this conversation. You're the problem. You people are so tone deaf. It's astounding to me. We didn't see it here because the clip is kind of focused in on his face. But when he comes out, this entire scene, I mean, this thing was so poorly orchestrated. This entire audience is a bunch of white males who, by the way, I happen to be one. I happen to be a white male, but there are certain things that you just do. I mean, how clueless do you have to be? The whole country is sort of angry at white cops killing black cops or killing black people. And you're just going to, parade a bunch of white people on stage while you deliver a speech that says you're tired of being vilified and you're going to stand up and you're going to refuse to be treated like animals and thugs. Guys, not the right time to be having this conversation. I mean, what a terrible look. How just insanely tone deaf do you have to be to get up there and start screaming at the rest of the country for problems that your department, your officers are directly causing? It's ridiculous. I mean, it's ridiculous to me. I don't know what went through their heads, but it is not something that looks good for law enforcement. Now, this is, of course, just the beginning. They are now claiming that they are going to be leaving. They're going to be prepared to leave. So like good children, or bad children, actually, anytime that somebody doesn't want to play with you or somebody says that you don't get to share their toys, that's fine. We're just going to take our toys and we're going to go home. We're going to get out of here. We're going to go back. We're going to play by ourselves. We don't need you anymore. That's essentially what the cops are saying. NYPD police prepare to leave the force. NYPD officers say they are ready to leave the force. No one has their backs amid nationwide efforts to restrict law enforcement. I read some stats recently. I think the NYPD, I think their budget's like billion with the B, 4 billion. I think LAPD's budget's like 1.8 billion. There's literally tens of thousands of cops. There's all sorts of police organizations, the Fraternal Order of the Police, The police have more support, more donations, more politicians in their pockets, bigger unions, more money, a monopoly on force. People go crawling to law enforcement agencies to get their votes when they're running for office. It is something that every single news agency, they're always doing these hagiography pieces on these officers who are, heroes just for showing up to work. God, we're cops. Every day we put on our badge and a gun, we have no idea what's going to happen to us. Even though we know from data and statistics, being a cop is like not even in the top 10 most dangerous jobs that exist in America. Construction, hanging power lines, fishing, going on for these salmon hunts up in Alaska and things are like 10 times more dangerous than anything that a cop does. And those people show up to work and they don't ever, hop on TV and complain and bitch and moan about not being recognized enough. I mean, where do you see nurses out there, even after the coronavirus thing, the nurse union going out there and saying, we're tired of something, whatever it is, for a problem that they created? No, it's just the cops. They act like such tough guys, but they have the most fragile egos of anything. Guys, your departments are a mess. It's filled with racism and corruption and injustice. You are the problem. You should weed out your own bad seeds. And then you can come and talk to us. What are you doing? What are you doing, Mr. Union Boss, to do something to reform your own internal policies? Or are you just going to stand up there and scream at the rest of us? No one else will back us at this point, says this agency, the Sergeants Benevolent Association. No one else will back us at this point. You've already got backing from everybody. Okay, people are pissed off now, and rightfully so. You've already got a ton of backing. They're trying to dismantle a little bit of that. Chiefs taking knees, humiliating themselves. Honestly, we feel alone out there. NYPD officers are leaving because of too often being under the microscope by the Civilian Complaint Review Board, the Internal Affairs Review Board, and other police watchdog groups. They're too often under the microscope. It's really hard to be under the microscope, All we're asking you to do is do your job. And if we have to monitor you to make sure you're doing your job, yeah, I get it. That's a huge burden. So we're just going to go ahead and let you do whatever you want to do. And good luck to you. Now, when we come back and we actually have some things that we want to say, hey, you know what? You're not doing something right. Maybe we're going to go ahead. Hey, we pay your bills. You are our employee. We are your employer. We pay the bills. We get to decide what contracts with the different unions and different agencies we want to enforce. We don't like your performance. We're going to ask you to change that. The fact that we're asking you to do what society has mandated you do is not leaving you alone. It's not leaving you out in the wilderness. We're just asking you to have some accountability. That's all that it is. And so for these guys, no one has our back. We feel alone out here and we're going to leave. Then go. Then leave. Then get up, pack your toys up, take your ball, throw your little temper tantrum, and get out of here. It's fine. A friend of mine said it best on Twitter, James. He said, sometimes the trash takes itself out. And yes, the people who want to leave, the people who recognize that change is coming are the ones who want to run. They want to run for cover. And that's okay. We can let them go. Let them go. We don't want them around anyways. We want a new set of reputable, honest officers on our law enforcement teams. Yeah. And that's all that I have for today. Let's take a look at the comments, shall we? So we covered a lot. We had 5 different topics. And let's see if we have any comments we want to wrap up the show with. So I should do this kind of in between so I don't save up a bunch of stuff for the very end, but we'll run through these. Okay, let's see here. So Lady Zaga is back. What's up, Lady Zaga? The hearing is in session in Denver. Part of the bill is to allow for Rocky police, for instance, to tell on their superior. Imagine that. Yeah, so mutiny in the ranks, and that's a great point. So what if in law enforcement we actually had people who would self-police themselves? So instead of this blue code, instead of this blue shield that exists, which I've talked about ad nauseum on this program, instead of police officers kind of sweeping misconduct under the rug, what if we created a culture that highlighted that? Okay, that's what we do here at our firm. We love when there are problems because that means we get to go fix them. When there are issues, we get to solve them. But we can only fix those things if we know about them. If we had problems and they all got swept under the rug, we would have catastrophic problems. And it would lead to a riot and to burning down buildings. So we address them sooner than that. Bobby, we investigated ourselves and we found we didn't break policy. It's exactly right. This is what the police do. They have their own internal affairs. They have their own internal procedures. They investigate themselves, and they have no accountability. So police, they were originally started to collect house taxes in the early 1900s. Yeah, this was an interesting thing, and this is something I kind of wanted to cover, sort of the evolution of policing in the United States. It's not, we didn't found our country and just have police departments. And there was a very big part in our history where we didn't have law enforcement agencies the way that we have them now. It's kind of a newer phenomenon. A lot of this stuff was kind of a mess early on. It sounded like, there was local sort of night watches, the night watch and those types of things were happening where people would sort of be punished and they would have to go and root out gambling and stop drinking and those types of things. So it's kind of a bad system, but it evolved. And as it evolved, it went through a number of different eras. It went through the Civil War era and Reconstruction. And a lot of the original policing came around to enforce slave laws. They wanted to prevent runaway slaves and they wanted to protect the property owners down there. And they didn't want, non-citizens breaking and entering and doing these things. So they needed to keep order of the slave population. So local municipalities and things created their own police departments that would then do their bidding. So it was almost sort of created to basically enslave people. I mean, that's good argument that a lot of police departments were started in that tradition, and then they evolved through the 1800s, post Reconstruction, post Civil War, post Emancipation, and as cities became bigger and populations became more aggregated, we were less rural. It made more sense to consolidate law enforcement into certain specific entities, certain bodies. But at some point, what happened is all of the competition got rooted out. We just have a monopoly on the use of force and the use of law enforcement force, and we provide all of this qualified immunity on the back end. So they can't do anything, or they can't do anything wrong. In other words, they can just do whatever they want. Nobody can challenge them. Everybody's scared to shake up the apple cart because they have so much power. They wield so much power over politicians and budgets and votes. That's why you see a lot of these police chiefs and things kind of integrating with the population because they know that change is coming. They know that people are very upset with them and they're trying to kind of bridge the gap, which to their credit, the closer I think we can come together, the better. But that is certainly going to take some time for us to get there. The body camera is for the police. You can't get the camera video until after the court case, which actually isn't true. So we get the camera immediately, right after somebody is arrested. We get those cameras as soon as they're available. One of the first things that we do. Zulu Zite says more funding, modern, constant psychiatric oversight. Yep, agree with you on that. With the right rules, body cams could be the best tool. I think there do need to be some rules on that. There needs to be some very clear guidelines on that. I can't turn them off. Can't delete them. You got to recharge your battery, get a new battery, have multiple batteries. I'm tired of the excuses. Put them on a public website, make them easily accessible, put them in MP4 files that we can download, edit, zoom in on. Give us access to the data. If you're going to stand by your policing, you should give us access to the data. I don't know what the problem is there. Nas says, I will sue you soon. Looking forward to it. Stop settling out of court. They do that. There's no case. Let's go here. Mental health. Robert Jordan applied to be a cop. He had a higher IQ than most cops. They did not hire him because he had a high IQ. Robert sued the police and lost. He lost because the police said they hire low IQ. I had not heard that story. That's pretty funny. I'd like to look into that. High IQ people go to training and quit after a while. When they get hired is the reason for the policy. Psychometrics is a robust field. It goes well beyond IQ. Yeah, some great comments from Bob. Bobby, appreciate that. 25 years. Wow, I'm old. You see the video of the Tucson public meeting where the chief lies about some auditors and does not want to show the video. They just talk. I've not seen that video. We have 3 million. Okay, Zuluzite. Remember, we have 3 million less than half of American voters who will subscribe to the cops' narrative until the day they die. Yeah, I agree. There is a segment of the population that will do anything that the cops want. They are in the nice category of bootlickers is what we call them. The cops did not enact reform for many years. Now the people will reform them. Yep, that's right. That's from Rook. This has been a long problem again for a long time. And yep, we're gonna cause some change here. Part of the conversation. Love that. All right, 93 pounds was the actual weight of that woman. She was a threat. All 95 pounds of her. She lost her shoe. 95 pounds. At the end of the day, there needs to be a reimagining of the police force to observe civil rights. They spend literally every moment of every investigation trying to get around them, which is absolutely true. I mean, we see this all the time. We have overheard and seen conversations of cops, literally like 3 or 4 of them, sometimes 6 of them, standing outside of the view of the dash cameras, talking about how they're going to charge somebody or arrest them or craft the narrative. We have seen that. A lot of the stuff we can't share because of client confidentiality and because of ethical rules surrounding the release of certain evidence to the public when it's comes through the prosecutor's office, which is part of a judicial court records. But it happens all the time. Cops will sit there and they'll say, hey, why'd you stop him? Why, he was speeding. Well, did you clock him on radar? Yeah, and the radar said what? Okay, so yeah, that's a good basis. We'll use the speeding as the basis for that. When you asked him, to step out of the car, what did he say? Yes or no? And then they'll just go through the whole thing and they'll say, okay, cool. So that's going to be this. They're just walking through the procedure and they're crafting a narrative that they're all going to be in line with. They're all going to be operating according to the same plan. It's like going, like a football play. Hey, I'm the quarterback. I'm going to tell you how to run. You run there, you run there, you run there. And they all go out. Their pieces all come together. We get the reports a few days later. Weird. Everything seems to be in total alignment. But we know that didn't happen because we have other evidence. So what's going on there? Why are they doing that? They are trying to create a narrative that supports their case, even when there isn't one. Happens all the time. I've never heard someone say there was a cop behind me. I feel safe. No, they are paranoid. They might get pulled over, right? Nobody wants anything to do with that. This channel is boring. Do you have like a hot wife or something that might show us her something? No, I do not, Chad. Chad Saroff Fernandez. I do not have a hot wife. I am not married. And if I did, there would be no nipples. I have a no nipple policy on this show. Probably no nipples will ever come on this show. Disgrace of the American flag with the blue line, gangs, officer to a mayor. The Constitution interferes with my job. How do we change that? We get rid of your job. We get rid of your job. You can no longer be a cop. You can no longer be a cop. If it interferes, if you executing your duties interferes with the United States Constitution or our state constitutions, you don't get to be a cop anymore. That position has to go away. And that's it for the comments, everybody. I really enjoyed this episode with you today. It's been so fun having the opportunity to speak with you. I think this is a great forum to help move the ball forward on these issues. A lot of people tend to get very, agitated and they want to identify with one particular side or the other. But really, let's think through some of this stuff. Let's think through some meaningful reform. I'm really excited to see that there are some leaders, it looks like, coalescing around these different movements in different parts of the country. It's good news. We need more leadership. We need more ideas. We need more conversations happening. That's really the only way that we're going to see any meaningful progress here. Now, if you haven't already taken a look, this is my new book. It's called Beginning to Winning: how to fight your case and succeed in the criminal justice system. I always like to plug it. It's brand new. It's up on Amazon. It's not even maybe 2 weeks old. So if you have been charged with a crime, or you know somebody who's been charged with a crime, check it out. It's applicable to any state, any jurisdiction, any type of criminal charge all across the country, and really, probably a lot of the world. But it's got some good fundamentals, 9 steps, 9 things that you can do if you've been charged with a crime. Otherwise, do me a huge solid. If you're on this channel and you're not already subscribed, hit subscribe so you get notified about the next videos that are up and coming, and share something for me too, please. That would be awesome, because this is really an important thing that we are going through right now. This is a transformational time, and we want to make sure that we get this right. We want to make sure that the people who matter are involved in the conversation. And the only way we can do that is if we get more eyeballs on what is taking place. We want more analysis. We want deeper thought. We want really, engaging, enthralling conversation. And so super happy that you were all here. Thank you, Zulu Zite. Fantastic. Had a great time. Thank you. Thank you back. Bobby, Bobby, thanks for the live chat. Really appreciated that. Kika Martinez, thank you for the smiley. It's been so much fun. Everybody have a wonderful night. I will see you next week, same time, same place, back here for Watching the Watchers. Have a great evening.